Won't you listen to reason? Will you open your eyes?
Jeff in Philly, how are you?
Hi, Matt. How's it going? I'm a big fan of the show.
Thanks.
In fact, my call is kind of related to your previous caller. I've been a lifelong atheist, much to my own personal suffering. I actually had to carry a copy of the Supreme Court ruling around with me in school to not stand for the pledge.
Yeah.
But so, in my early 20s, I took to, with theists, when I would have an argument with them, I would actually tell them, well, why don't we go to court? You know, you bring God, and I'll bring reality, and, you know, there'll be consequences. And that's when I found out that atheists actually have a Roe versus Wade situation with a case called U.S. versus Ballard.
Mm-hmm.
U.S. versus Ballard was a case where a preacher was scamming people through the mail, and the upshot of the whole case is that if someone truly believes something, you cannot charge them criminally for it. Basically, you cannot challenge religion in a criminal court. So that's how the Scientologists get away with it. That's how the Mormons get away with it. I mean, Joseph Smith was prosecuted for essentially the story of Mormonism, and then he changed it to a religion, and all of it's legal. So, and a lot of atheists don't even know about this.
I'm not sure that that's actually what U.S. v. Ballard actually establishes as precedent. But I'd have to go back. I'd have to go back and look at it in more detail. But I'm not sure that. Now we already have Supreme Court, you know, establishing that the truth is, you know, always a defense. But whether or not somebody sincerely believes something, I'm virtually certain that they're not protected from prosecution for that. I mean, that's just.
Well, I'm looking at the Wikipedia entry right now as a quick reference, and the reason why it was tossed back was because it said it got too close to looking at the actual truth of religion. And, you know, personally, I see the solution to religion is, you know, to take them to court and make them bring God. You know, I'm anti-theistic in that aspect. That I want religion eliminated.
I don't see it. I mean, this idea has been toyed around with before. There's even movies about it. I don't see where you accomplish anything when you're talking about people who believe, in many cases, that you know, it's all magical thinking and this is all God's will. And I mean, what good does it do to bring? You know, you can't force God into court. There's a reason we don't allow spectral evidence anymore. So I mean, you know, it's an interesting idea that people have toyed with a number of times, but I don't see that there's any real value to actually kind of move in that direction.
Well, I think that the value is by simply eliminating Sunday schools and churches and all those other things, that we break the viral cycle of religion being implanted as much as humanly possible.
And see, I'm actively opposed to legislating the elimination of those things. I think it's a violation of the Constitution to attempt to legislate the end of churches. And I'll fight anybody who tries to do it.
No, I respect how you feel on that, but sometimes, you know, sometimes people have to be made to do things that they don't want to do.
Really?
You know, who wants to pay taxes?
Really? I mean, okay, you need a constitutional amendment first before what you're saying would actually be viable, something that completely erases the First Amendment and several others. And so I'm actually a fan of the First Amendment, and what you're proposing is the elimination of it.
No, I'm proposing simply that in order to have a religion, you have to prove it.
No, that's the elimination of the First Amendment.
Well, then it'd be just what I'm saying is that if it's in order to be a religion, it has to be proven. If you want to have a business, then you're subject to truth in advertising laws, taxation, and all the other stuff.
Sure, and I'm a fan of actually enforcing those laws and extending it to claims about, you know.
But truth in advertising would include that they have to prove that there's an afterlife, and that God is watching, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Okay.
So, you know, it boils down to the same thing. You know, the end result is the goal, not necessarily the path to it.
No.
That's the way I feel.
No, I completely reject that as a horrific statement. The ends do not always justify the means.
Well, I didn't say they did. What I said is...
Yes, you did. You said what matters is the result.
Is that however that goal is reached, not necessarily through an abhorrent method, but like Al Capone was arrested for tax evasion, not for running bootleg liquor and killing people. You know?
What you said was that the goal is reached is what's important.
I agree. I phrased it poorly.
Okay.
Basically, as long as it is a legal and ethical means of reaching it.
Sure, and you're not proposing a legal method right now, and I'd argue that that method's unethical too.
Why is it unethical to stop people from being defrauded?
Because first of all, that's not the whole ball of wax with regard to religion. I mean, don't get me wrong. I think they're wrong, and I think they're encouraging a delusion. But this is not, and yes, there's no denying that religions, by and large, can be viewed as big businesses. But I can also walk into whatever church I want anytime without actually donating anything, without buying anything, because we're talking about ideas here. And that's what the First Amendment is protecting. There are limitations that churches have with regard to businesses, and I think we should do a better job of enforcing those things. But simply, legislating the end of religion is, I mean, it's an outright violation of the Constitution. And I would say that it's unethical, because one of the things about getting rid of religion is people asked before, well, when you get rid of this, what takes its place? And, we've mentioned that, when you get rid of the cancer, what takes its place? You're healed, you're cured. But by and large, we know that this isn't the case. For people who have traumatically had their religious beliefs kind of taken away or shockingly removed from them, they haven't been given the tools to come up with a worldview, a secular worldview, that actually benefits them. Moreover, though, we're talking about the sanctity of people's minds. You cannot legislate what people do and don't believe. It's pointless.
You can stop them from, say, not inoculating their children.
Sure.
And in this case, we would be inoculating them against delusional thought during the most important developmental time of their lives. Give me a child before 7, I'll give you the man.
We can keep, yes, we have laws already, and we should do more to enforce those laws to keep people who don't want to, vaccinate their kids to do so.
Right, but I'm saying we should vaccinate them against religion by saying no Sunday school, no church, no nothing.
Yeah.
No before 18.
Boy, I'm glad I don't live in the country.
Smoke the weed of church all you want.
I'm glad I don't live in the country that you wish we lived in, because you wouldn't be able to teach your kids.
Sure I would, because I'm not teaching them religion.
You're teaching them religion's wrong.
No, I'm
Can you
teaching
prove
them
that? Can you prove that?
It's delusional. I don't have to prove it. As it says, the burden
No.
of proof
We just had a big, long call about the burden of proof, and I agree that if your position is that you don't accept religions, that you don't have a burden of proof there because you're just not accepting them. But if you're going to legislate that religions are wrong, you now have a burden of proof.
But I'm not legislating. I'm just saying religions have to prove it. In order to enjoy the benefits under our government that a religion has, they must produce God and put him on the stand and get his opinions and have him say they're right.
Yeah, except that, you're trying to set up standards that are ridiculous with regard to religion. And I agree that they expose the ridiculous nature of religion, but they violate the very freedoms that the country's founded on.
I disagree that the right to fraud and delude is a civil right.
Yeah, the right to delude yourself is in fact...
The right to delude yourself, but not to delude others.
Well, you know what? Nobody's forcing people to go to church.
No, I would disagree, because they're programmed from day one by their parents.
No, sir. Some people are indoctrinated and programmed, and they escape. And some people aren't indoctrinated and programmed, and they fall into it anyway. Religion's not something you can sum up in one little simplified nugget and then say, we're going to chuck that freedom aside because I don't like it and you can't prove it's true.
Well, if you have the same standard for everyone, though, that is equal treatment.
Yeah, that's equal treatment. I don't know. I don't agree with your attempt to justify eliminating people's liberties
it's not a liberty. What about the liberty of the child?
It's a liberty for them to believe whatever they believe. And it is a liberty, and it is a liberty for them to teach their children honestly what they believe to be true. As unfortunate as it may be, you would deny parents the right to, in all sincerity and honestly, pass on what they believe to be true. Who the hell are you?
Obviously a smarter person than they are, because I'm not the one who's taking a child during the most vulnerable stage of their life and putting fantasy into their heads as fact. You know, that's what they're doing.
You mean like Santa? You mean like Santa? Are you going to outlaw Santa Claus too? Are you going to outlaw Santa Claus too?
I'm
yes or no?
On this Santa thing.
The continuation of the call, the continuation of this call hinges on you actually answering that question.
I would outlaw Santa if I could take Jesus with it.
At least you're consistent. Bye-bye.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've seen that. I've seen that more and more is totalitarian atheists.
Yeah.
It's just crazy. You do realize if you start taking away freedoms in this country, we're the first to go. We're the least trusted.
I agree with him on how we go about, you know, that there is a burden of proof, and there's some requirement to establish this, and that we should make sure that people aren't, you know, indoctrinating people, that they're not misusing, that they're not using religious indoctrination to defraud people. I think I think churches should not be tax exempt. I think they should have open books. I think we should have severe limitations on what they can and can't do. Specifically for these reasons, but I also believe that it is batshit crazy, just as it is for theists, to pretend that you can attempt to legislate what's in somebody's mind. And and that's not what he was suggesting. I think he realizes that we can't legislate what's in somebody's mind. But when you then say, well, you can believe this privately, but you can't talk about it unless you think it's true, you've lost your mind. It is entirely impractical to attempt to do this. And second of all, you've convinced yourself that you're smart enough to see what the end result of all this necessarily is. And I'm not convinced that the end result of basically legislating religion away is the result that you think it's going to be. So you're kind of tossing around this fantasy utopia that you've built up in your head. And I don't buy it. Sorry. I prefer the freedoms. And one of the things about, for example, freedom of speech, it's one of those things where the freedom that allows me to speak is the freedom that allows other people to say things that I don't like. Oh yeah, we have laws against people saying things that are untrue. Kind of. People are allowed to express opinions, whether they're true or not. If you're going to legislate to the point to where people aren't allowed to openly express their religion if it's not true, then you would have to, if you're going to be consistent and get rid of Santa Claus that way too, legislate any expression of an opinion or a view that can't be demonstrated to be true. That's the kind of world you're advocating. I don't want to live in that world. Ever. Not for 5 minutes. That'd drive me absolutely crazy.